Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the House of Bloodstein Mentralysis, Part 1, Chapter 3, Observing a Wedding. Last week, Sam's weird morning continued as she looked out the window and saw her cousin-in-law, Sarah, flying around outside her window, joyously whooping and soaring through the air. Sarah cannot fly. There are characters in my League of Elder universe who can fly by themselves, but Sarah is not one of them, and she's can't even fly a ripcar very well. She knows how to do it, but she's just not very good at it. She lets her brother do all the flying. But there she was, and she told Sam that Inez of Inari, a hospitaller, would be by to check her over, make sure everything was good, and that he needs to get to Castle Bloodstein as quickly as possible. And Sam was all confused. She said, "Come on in, what are you doing?" And then a ship appeared. Out came Inez of Inari and a Manama lady at his side, and Sam was elated. She went down, saw him, he checked her over. Didn't really have any concrete explanations for why she was having a odd morning, except that she had been subjected to the caustic agents and greases and other workings of the Zaffin Hemolyzer, which are pretty fatal normally. That was probably causing most of her symptoms, which she accepted. The Manama lady turned out to be Lady Talarin, who was first introduced in the Temple of the Exploding Head series, and she had married Inez. Being a Manamas love to test each other. They love to test each other's strength and speed and see who's the strongest, who can run the fastest, who can climb the tree over there the fastest, and who can fight the best. And that's a big one. And Lady Talarin's like, "You're an Anuian Manama, a greater Manama. I've never seen one before, and I've always wanted to test one of them in battle." And she wanted to fight right there and then, and Sam, who considers herself Vith at this point and finds her own Manama traditions distasteful at this point, said no, forget it. But then Sam found herself needing to get to Castle Bloodstein. She didn't really have any way to get there without making an appointment. It could take time, so she asked if Inez could take her out there, and Inez can't fly, but Talarin can fly. She was taught how to fly by Captain Davidge. And she says, "Well, you're not going anywhere until we get this settled." And so, sure enough, Sam had to take her out to the Grove, and they duked it out, and Sam beat her up. Since Sam's a much larger Anuian Manama, much stronger than the little Konox Lady Talarin, pretty much took care of her, but Talarin's pretty scrappy and wanted to have a round two. And then there's some weird pirate ship showed up in the bay that Sam had to go take care of immediately. That was last week. This week, we shift gears and we head away from Sam at Castle Blanchford, and we head off to see Magistrate Kilos of Tusk, if you remember her from the previous books. And she's been around in the League of Elder since book 1. She was Captain Davidge's first officer. She started off as a Marine and then joined the fleet, and then was there she's pretty much there in every book, and then she went with her Captain Davidge's son, Lord Cable, into the depths of the Temple of the Exploding Head. So she's been around for a while, and then I'm working on a book that features her son, Sebastian. So she's been around forever. She's just a common fixture of these books. So we're gonna check her out for a while and see what's going on with her. In Chapter 3, Observing a Wedding. Let's begin, shall we? We only have, after this, one more chapter in the first part, in Dreams of the Wailing Room, and then we're done, and then we move to Part 2. Kai. Magistrate Kilos walked down the windy beach, fully dressed in her old Marine uniform, red-tailed coat, white pants, and tall Broussard boots. She loved her old Marine boots, up to the knees in stout leather, with a sole hard enough to kick a man's teeth out. The most comfortable thing she had ever worn. The beach she walked on was mostly pristine, with sugary white sand marred only by the occasional patch of driftwood or seaweed. She had to stop herself from picking up the driftwood and taking it with her. As an impoverished child near the city of Tusk, she used to collect wood with her brothers and sisters to sell in the city streets. They did anything they could to earn enough for their next meal. It took practice and a fair amount of skill to walk fully shod on the sand and not become bogged down. She grew up with beaches and the sea. Walking on it was like nothing to her. By the way, where was she? The beach was a long, perfect curve. The water, roaring in at a steady rate, was an awesome shade of aquamarine tipped in orderly lines of white foam and a haircut of squawking seabirds looking for an easy meal. Only the big blue on her home world of Onaris, the deepest and clearest ocean in the league, was that shade of blue. She would know it anywhere. But she wasn't on Onaris, the place where she grew up. She was on Cana. Cana was her home now, along with her husband and her son and a few of her sisters. She wasn't a Marine anymore either, not in decades. She must be dreaming. Kai had always been good at detecting a dream as it was happening. She was fully capable of analyzing the dream, to appreciate it if it was a good one, and to wake herself if the dream wasn't to her liking. She usually dreamed of her toddler son Sebastian and her husband and her faithful Silvertech Tweeterbird, who was never far from her side. Her goal was to one day give Tweeter to her son, but that was way down the line once Sebastian was grown. Despite being alone on the beach, she felt this was a nice dream, so she would just let it play out. Maybe her son and her husband and her bird would be waiting for her somewhere. Up ahead was a small church, just an unpainted plank cabin on weedy pylons beyond the wave line, scoured smooth by sand and wind. The church was decorated in fronds and strings of nice white flowers caught in the wind. 2 people came out to greet her, suntanned, waving, all smiles. Kai recognized them. It was Philip of Blanchford, wearing loose white clothing made for the wind and the beach. Look at Philip, all grown up, so handsome, just like his cousin Kay, though Philip had a more conservative, more rugged look to him. He was gray-looking, but not so much that he was unapproachable. Kay was almost too good-looking. Kay was like a Vith god. Philip, though, more earthy, more normal-looking, was just right. Kai had known Philip since he was a boy, the second son of Lady Poe of Blanchford. He was quiet, soft-spoken, a brainy, reliable type, sort of like Kai's husband. He was the kind of fellow Kai favored and was attracted to. He was totally unlike his knickers-in-a-twist, blue-haired twin sister Sarah, who was a total loudmouth and impulsive hothead. At Philip's side was Thomasina the 19th, an imperious woman from the Saffin city of Wham, who had fallen for Philip some years back. Kai had never figured mild-mannered Philip as someone who favored wild, strong, opinionated women, and Thomasina was all that in spades. Tall, tautly muscled, long-legged, Thomasina looked like a half-civilized warrior princess. Kai knew she was greatly respected as a portator and prohibitionist in Wham. They stood together by the church. Thomasina was wearing a wraparound beach thong and no shoes. Her hair, which was normally dyed a leafy shade of green, was back to its natural brown. The wind and sea had stained it to a healthy blondish shade. Her born name was Rose, but only Philip got to call her that. "Hey, Kai, glad you could join us," Philip said, warmly shaking her hand. "We're getting married, me and Rose. We didn't want a big Vis ceremony, so we decided to do it here, by the sea. We've fallen in love with this place. We didn't have time to invite anybody, but since you're here, why don't you join us? Help us celebrate our marriage." "Sure, and congratulations." Philip and Thomasina went inside the church. Kai trudged through the sand and followed them in. A sign by the door read, "Wedding of Mr. and Mrs. Illabuck." "Mr. and Mrs. Illabuck?" Kai asked. "That's us. We're using an alias in case anybody came looking." "Would you like to get comfortable, Kai?" Thomasina asked. "I've got some extra beachwear here somewhere." "Nah, I'm good, thanks." Inside, the uneven wooden floor was dusted with sand. Her boots scraped in a gritty fashion across the planks. They had a metal wash basin full of ice. Bottles of good Onaris ale peeked out in an inviting fashion. Kai took two out by the necks and grabbed a seat on the creaky pew. As she got comfortable, she heard a great deal of noise coming from the back of the church. Lots of banging and sounds of wooden planks being lifted and then dropped in a workmanlike fashion. Kai got annoyed. This was Philip and Thomasina's moment, and some fool was ripping the place up while they were trying to do it. Kai got up, still holding her ales, and went to the back, determined to take control of this situation and put a stop to the racket. Near the back wall, a girl with frizzy blonde hair and wearing a light beach robe was flopped on her hands and knees, doing something with the floor, pulling up planks and setting them aside. She had opened a hole in the floor several planks wide, and Kai could see the shack's previously hidden footers pounded into the sand, littered with accumulated beach trash. "What are you doing here?" Kai asked. "My friend's here trying to get married." "I'm hiding something," the girl said. She had something long and skinny hidden under a sheet. Kai set her drinks aside. "Here, let me help you. You're making too much noise." The girl pulled the sheet aside, revealing an odd metal device. It was a round dial about 2 feet in diameter, composed of polished brass and striking midnight blue metal. Very impressive construction. The dial was mounted atop a long pole, also midnight blue, and it reminded Kai of a street lamp. "What's that?" Kai asked. "Control column," the girl replied. "Control column to what?" "The Bower chest. It's very precious, and I'm hiding it from her. She wants to destroy it." "Yeah, okay, whatever." The girl wrestled the whole thing through the hole and into the floor, wedging it in the footers. They replaced the planks and returned to the pews. The girl didn't seem to be in a festive mood, and she sat slumped in her pew, hugging herself, as if she were either cold or just painfully shy, and stared at the floor. The girl was killing Kai's mood. "What's the matter? This is a wedding," Kai said. "Supposed to be happy." The girl's light robe revealed pale arms and legs. She didn't answer. "Do you know Philip and Thomasina?" Again, she didn't answer. "Come on, this is a nice dream I'm having. You're messing it up. Want an ale? It's good stuff. I got two." Kai held out one of the sweating bottles. The girl rustled a little and looked at the bottle. "For me?" she asked softly. "Sure. I got a whole tub full. You better grab it before I change my mind and drink it myself." Tentatively, the girl reached out and took the bottle. She reacted to its cold, wet surface and the smooth glass with wonder. She touched it with the pads of her fingers. She rolled the glass across her cheek, savoring the feel. "It actually tastes better than it feels," Kai said, taking a drink. "Ah, so amazing," the girl said in awe. "It's been such a long time since I felt such things. To see the color of the bottle, to feel the water droplets on my fingers." She took a drink, savoring the taste of the ale. She giggled and came out of her shell a little bit. "I am Chrysania," she said. The name was familiar to Kai. Chrysania, as in Lady Chrysania of Bloodstein? "Yes. The one who was sick? The one with no face I heard about?" "I was sick, yes. I couldn't see or hear. I had no tongue to taste with, and no mouth to give my tongue a home. I had no hands or feet. I was entombed within my own body." Kai was horrified. "That sounds terrible." Chrysania certainly appeared to be healthy, pretty, nice complexion, soft hands and feet. In this dream Kai was having, she seemed to radiate good health. "Your friends helped restore me, Lord Blanchford and his party. I am grateful to them." She took another drink. "Such kindness they showed me. I love them all." The ceremony began, the preacher reading from a holy book, Philip and Thomasina standing before him, holding hands. Chrysania seemed enraptured. "Oh, I've been married many times," she said. "What happened?" Kai asked. They died. I lived and they died. My children too, over and over." Kai polished off her beer. It was good. "So that thing back there you hid, who are you hiding it from?" "From her." "Who?" A shadow fell across the window facing the sea. Chrysania covered her mouth in fear. "She's here for me," she said. "Who is?" Kai asked. A dark figure stood at the window, gazing into the church, glaring directly at Lady Chrysania. A woman stood there, bone-white features, framed with a carpet of impossibly thick black hair. Her hands were placed on the sill, her claws digging into the wood. She had a menacing presence and gave Kai a start, until she recognized the face. She composed herself and laughed. "Oh, it's just Sam," she said to Lady Chrysania. "She's a Monima, pale skin, the black hair, it's all Monima stuff. She's a sweetheart. Sam, you gave me a fright. Come on in, Philip and Thomasina are getting married." Sam marched into the church and approached, bringing darkness with her. As she neared, Kai noticed something not quite right with Sam. Sam was always such a happy person, married to Kay, deeply in love with him, eating Vith food like a horse, always arguing with Sarah. This Sam was different. There was no trace of her happy, so-in-love expression, no warmth, no smiles, no feeling. Instead, she bore the demeanor of a cold, cruel, conniving woman bent on doing no good. Those coal black eyes, missing Sam's usual light, gave Kai chills. She came up to Chrysania and wrenched her from the pew. Sam's fingernails were much longer than normal, like a series of black daggers. Chrysania squealed and dropped her bottle of ale. "No, please, leave me alone," she cried. "Think you could get away from me?" Sam said, dragging Chrysania out of the church by her arm. "Where would you be without me? Lost, imprisoned. Come along, it's time for you to go back to where you belong." Kai didn't like this one bit. "Hey, Sam, what are you doing?" Sam threw a hateful glance at Kai. "Stay out of this." Kai set her drink down and followed them out. Outside, dusk had fallen in a cyan line across the surf, and the stars were out. Sam was way off in the distance, dragging the struggling Chrysania inland through the sand. Kai ran after them. Moving steadily inland, Kai saw an odd structure looming up in the darkness. Built in an architectural style not found on Onaris, Kai didn't recognize it at all. It was a partially ruined walled enclosure, guarded by two crumbling spires. An archway was built into the far wall. It went down into the ground at a steep angle. Sam headed right for the archway, dragging Chrysania through it. Kai could hear Chrysania's screams and pleas for mercy echoing as they passed through. Kai, following, entered several minutes later. Through the archway was a tunnel heading down. The walls of the tunnel were lined with glass display cases, like one would see at a museum. The cases were full of gorgeous swag, all laid out and lit up with carefully concealed lighting. The items in the cases must have been worth a fortune. Kai didn't have time to admire the displays, for ahead she heard the sounds of a struggle. She saw a figure supine upon the ground. "Chrysania, is that you?" she asked. As Kai approached, she got a good look at the figure and was horrified. The figure had no face, no eyes, no nose, mouth, hands, or feet. It was a pitiful, blank creature, like a mannequin. With its stumps, it clutched at its throat, trying to breathe, but having no nose or mouth to breathe with. Kai picked her up and held her, desperate, not knowing what to do or how to help her. A voice spoke from the darkness. "And now, Magistrate, time for you to join her." Kai saw a figure approaching, hands raised in a threatening fashion. Kai could feel a haze of malice, of pure evil, coming from the figure. She reached for her SK pistol, but it wasn't there. She'd had just about enough of this dream. It had gone from warm and homey to brutal and terror-filled. She closed her eyes. "Wake up! Wake up!" Must still be dreaming. She plunged into a horrifying delirium. She could see nothing. She could hear nothing. She could feel the vibration of her heart beating, also feel the galling sting of cold metal piercing her body. She was seated in something hard and cold, like a rough-hewn stone chair, and she felt coarse, loose fabric draped all around her body. Humid. It was very humid where she was, and terribly cold. She struggled for breath, feeling herself smothering with each failed attempt. Of all things, she wanted to take a refreshing, cleansing breath. Forget not being able to see or hear. Not being able to breathe was the worst, most terrible sensation of all, like being perpetually on the verge of suffocating, yet not dying. Lingering forever at that horrible moment. The machines plunged into her, kept her alive, kept her existence going, but they provided nothing else. Chrysania had no face. She would go mad soon if she couldn't take a breath. If she could have screamed, she would have. She didn't seem to have a mouth to scream with. She put her hands to her face, but she had no hands, just stumps. "I have no face either. I can't wake up." Something came and fluttered before the smooth roundness of her face. She felt the churning of beating wings and the occasional ticklish brush of something delicate and warm. It was Tweeter, her dutiful little bird. He had come to her at last. She felt him land on her shoulder and sit. She knew he was there, though she couldn't see or hear him. Kai felt crushing sorrow. No eyes to see her son, no mouth to kiss him, and Tweeter sitting by her doomed side. No, Tweets, go to my son. Don't stay here with me. My son needs you. For the love of creation, go to my son, please. Abandon me. But Tweeter would go nowhere. He was forever connected to her life force. He would sit there with her in the dark forever, come what may. And with that, we conclude Chapter 3, Observing a Wedding. What's actually going on here is pretty obvious to me, but I wrote it, so a lot of folks find this opening part, Dreams in the Wailing Room, pretty confusing. It all becomes clear a little bit later. Front part of the book has a very hazy, sort of dreamy quality to it, and that's by design. Once the truth is revealed, it all makes perfect sense. Yeah, they find it pretty weird, and it's supposed to be weird. So, we visited Lieutenant Kilos, or Magistrate Kilos, having a dream of her days back in the Marines, walking along a beach. She's seen Philip, Blanchard, and Thomasina of Wham getting married. They were using an alias, Mr. and Mrs. Illibuck, and that's a nod to my college days. If you're a fan of Ohio State football, you know what the Illibuck is. It's a wooden, well, it used to be a real turtle, but now it's like a wooden turtle that's shared between Ohio State and the University of Illinois, the Illini, and whoever wins the annual game gets to keep the Illibuck, the wooden turtle. And in the old days, it was a real turtle, but now it's just wood. And lately, Ohio State has owned this Illibuck, But when I was going to school, when John Cooper was the head coach of Ohio State, we couldn't beat Michigan or Illinois to save our life, so the Illibuck was with Illinois for a long time, for like 4 or 5 years straight, I think. But that was then. This is now. Ohio State cannot be defeated by the Illini. I can't remember the last time Illinois won. Oh well. Next week, we hit the final chapter in the first part, Dreams of the Wailing Room, and it's called number 4, Visit from Sarah. And then we'll be done with this odd start to the book, this dreamy, mystical start to the book. And then we put pedal to metal, and so we hit part 2, which is called The Immortal. It's the largest part in this book. So, until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.